talk about the...
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 1st meeting of the Hyde Park Planning Board. Please take note of exits around the room in case of mishap or emergency. And now join me as we salute the American flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is ATHANAS East Solar Farm. Applicants are seeking site plan approval as well as special use permit approval to enact a solar farm located at 1436 Route 9G. Making a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Let me turn it over to you guys. This is your first public presentation.
Correct.
I don't know how many people here want to comment, but you may want to aim it toward the audience instead of us because we've all...
They were told to point it this way so the
Okay,
camera
sorry.
could capture
camera.
it for the...
Great.
We're
Thank
happy
you.
to do
Sorry.
whatever you prefer. My name is Dawn Dana. I'm with Labella Associates. We are the engineering consultant for the project developer. I'm joined by Adam Webb, who is the construction director for New York Solar 1000 LLC. So this is a solar farm development proposed by New York Solar 1000. The project site is located at 1436 Route 9G, town of Hyde Park. The site is an 84-acre parcel that at present is inactive agricultural farmland within the Greenbelt zoning district. The project consists of 2 clusters of fixed tilt solar photovoltaic panels totaling 2.6 megawatts in output. The project area, including the panel areas, the road, other improvements, comprise 7.4 acres. The array site is located 560 feet from Route 9G at its nearest point. Other project elements include a stone access road entering from Route 9G. This is largely an improvement of an existing farm road. A culvert will be installed where the road approaches the array over a wetland area. The southern array includes a concrete pad for a small metal storage shed and for the transformer and switchgear equipment that serves both clusters. So it's located only on the southern array. Power output from the panels is converted from direct current to alternating current by string-mounted inverters that are installed on the racking systems that hold the panels. Power is collected within the array area by underground lines and then carried out to Route 9G, connection point with Central Hudson, by overhead line. The underground line is about 1,180 linear feet, while the overhead line is 710 linear feet using 4 utility poles. Each of the 2 array clusters is fenced entirely by 7.5-foot high black metal fencing. Site preparation will include some tree clearing along the eastern portion of the access road and in areas within both array clusters, portions of those array areas. The clearing totals about 3.4 acres. The project design includes extensive vegetative screening at the northern and southern edges to screen the project from adjoining residential properties. The vegetative screening is comprised of Norway spruce and eastern white pine. Disturbed areas outside of the arrays will be reseeded with a pollinator seed mix, and within the arrays, a DEC-approved conservation seed mix will be used. I wanted to note for the purposes of the board that this drawing has been updated based on comments we received at the April meeting. We've not, as you know, been required to refile all of the site plan materials with the expectation that additional changes will be made based on comments that we received this evening. So this plan differs a little bit from what people will see on the table by the door, but with additional changes incorporated, a new set of plans will be refiled with the town. We did address what we heard about in April, which is the side yard setback issue. That was, we had interpreted the code to apply the requirement, the setback requirement to the photovoltaic panels themselves and not to the fence. But once we got the correct interpretation of that, we made minor adjustments to the fence location. So those are all compliant now.
Okay.
Made changes to the dimensions table, again, once we worked with Liz to figure out exactly what the principal and accessory uses were in both existing and proposed condition, we were able to update that. We've not been able to provide detail at this point on the switchgear and transformer equipment dimensions, appearance, et cetera, because those are not yet specified. But we have provided illustrative detail in the revised plans for typical appearance of such equipment. And in response to the board's question last month about the road is within the leased area, so no easements are necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Dana. Just a couple of quick comments before I go to the consultants. First, I believe that typical is actually acceptable to the board. You don't have to call it out if you're still going to be doing something. That's what we usually see as typical. It
Okay.
just, what you call out, what you ultimately order and install can't be too different from what you've shown. That's Ms. Moss's determination, whether it's de minimis, and we don't sort of nail your feet to the ground on something like that.
Okay.
Second, and this isn't necessarily applicable to this site, but I've been using some terms interchangeably up here, or not interchangeably. Our code requires that glare not be cast onto adjoining properties, and I've been saying you can avoid all glare, and I've been using the example to say if you're walking through a parking lot and you happen to look down at a car and the sun flashes quickly, that's glare. It's not, actually, it's glint. There's a difference. Glare is actually of a longer duration. It's a sustained, it's also more intensity. I can't find any engineering terms yet that give me a way to measure it, but it's important to note for the audience or anybody who's watching that all of these panels are meant to absorb light, not reflect.
Correct.
So in the glare analysis that's been provided thus far, that's made note of, and I think that what I've been meaning to say is that you can't make everything go away in terms of glints because those are quick and rapid. Glare, though, being sustained and longer and maybe even being causing eye damage, it's retinal damage, et cetera, is something that you must avoid. And I think that in every case so far that has been the case. We have another application that they're revising the design layouts, they're revising the glare analysis as well. It's a little different than yours because it's not surrounded by all the trees that you have, already the natural screening plus the screening you're offering. But I wanted to just go on the record and state that I didn't realize that there was a difference, and now I do. There's a difference in really the way it's measured. So the things you learn when you're on the planning board, it's always fun. Liz, comments?
I went over my comments on April 3rd. That's the date of my most recent comments. As Dawn has just mentioned, we did have a number of, just a few discussions back and forth about some of the comments for more clarity so that there's a clear understanding of how they came to their calculations for impervious area and other matters. So what I'm hoping is that we'll see a submittal that'll address a certain number of the comments and that at some point we can move forward.
I'll make a note that we circulated for this, not quite enough time to do a secret determination this evening, but that we're getting there. I'd like to, I hope, get close to doing, not get close, I'd like to do a secret determination at the next meeting. That noted, we also received in the interim a letter from the Department of Transportation. I'm doing some investigating beyond this. One of their second statement says a traffic impact study should be prepared and submitted for further review and comments.
I was surprised by that as well because this is, I'm guessing once or twice a month someone comes in. And I don't know if the best way to handle that would be to provide some kind of a response letter to New York State DOT elaborating on that, but the other matters, I guess they'll just have to respond.
It looked like a standard letter. They even
Yeah.
talked about synchro
Yeah.
analysis,
I
which
know
would
that,
never be
which
necessitated
very
by
much
this.
surprised me, but it would be nice to have some kind of a response on the record to
What
clarify.
I talked to Ms. Dana about offline was for them to provide a narrative expanding
Yeah.
what the numbers are in the environmental assessment form.
That would
Yes.
be great.
That way, I think that would satisfy us, because the numbers in the EAF do not justify to me, a traffic impact study looks at a broad variety of factors,
Right.
but it's really talking about how much load you're increasing on the road. There'll be some construction traffic, but once that's done,
It's temporary.
there is very little traffic, and that's
Yeah.
temporary.
It's like a cell tower site. It's just not a traffic generator.
No. So, but at any rate, like I said, I'm pursuing some avenues to try to get some explanation of what they're looking for, but in the meantime, Ms. Dana has agreed to do a little bit more elaborate narrative based on what they know what the numbers are going to be.
Yeah, and sorry for the back and forth, but I guess when the board gets to the point after hearing from the public, it'd be nice to coordinate when a submittal may be coming in with when the board schedules their next,
Yeah, I
the
should add,
continuation of a hearing if,
right, for the audience, that we haven't seen the revised plans either. We're still looking at the same plans that are up there, but I did know that based on the meeting last time, you were going to make some revisions. Correct. Anything else, Ms. Axelson? Thank you. Ms. Polidoro, any comments?
No, just that as you noted, we're in the 30-day seeker window, so no action can be taken tonight, and I won't have any comments until we see the new plans.
Right. We circulated on April 3rd, so the agencies have until 2 more days in which to respond.
April 11th was circulated.
was when they were
Oh, that's when they were mailed, so May
Maybe
11th.
provided to us
That's
and
right,
sent out,
sorry.
so.
Okay, May 11th. So they have an additional week in which to respond. Thank you. Mr. Pickett, any comments?
Like you, I think I drilled down a bit on the glare and the glint issue in the past. And it's hard to get a good definition on each of them. I mean, you can't
What does sustained mean?
apply
How
or
many
put.
seconds?
Sustained
Or minutes?
is, you know, when they talk about glare, it's something that'll bother you, but then it goes away right away. Where glint is
Very
following
brief.
a motorhome like through Arizona during the middle of the day that's got a huge rear window in there. You
That's
know, where
glare.
You can't
Yep, that's
see her,
glare.
that's glint. where you-
Glare,
you know,
glare. Glint is the quick one. Glare is the
Well,
long one.
that's, if you're passing them doing
Oh,
90.
yes, that's true,
So it's
too. Yep.
Quick. But thanks for the definition on that. No, looks good so far.
Thank you. Ms. Wasser?
I have no further comments.
Ms. Dexter?
When I read the DOT memo, I thought the last two, about the traffic impact study and the need for synchroanalysis, it did look like they might have just grabbed the wrong template for this. But I did wonder about the first point, in that they may not be aware of a driveway connection, that this may not be an approved driveway. I'm not sure if DOT requires, just like we do here in the town, that there be an actual driveway entrance.
DOT has separate standards for farm roads
They
than
do.
for actual
Versus
construction
commercial.
roads. And so whatever, if this is a farm road, even though it may be an existing road, it's gonna have to be upgraded and meet their new standard and get an upgraded permit. So,
So they may need a highway work permit.
Oh, they will.
Yeah,
yes.
I think so.
Okay.
will.
Yeah, that was my
Just
point,
not
is
a
that
traffic study.
I thought the first bullet might be relevant.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
it
I
is.
think that's correct, because, again, they have to upgrade the road.
Okay.
And as Ms. Dana pointed out, it's going to be a gravel road, so they don't increase impervious surfaces.
Okay. And then, I don't know if this was covered at the last meeting, my apologies, I missed that meeting, but did we talk at all about fire truck access to the panel site, and how they might or might not be able to get there?
Nope, we
That-
circulated.
that
to the
hasn't
fire
been-
department.
Okay,
Raised.
okay.
I-
Because it's been brought up for the other solar arrays that have been before us.
Do you have a specific concern? Dip in the road?
Well, if you've walked it, it's fairly steep,
Mhm.
and I would just want to know if they could make that turn as they go, as they try to go up. You know, I also know that I think there's residences on the north side that might have a more gentle access to get to the top, the A11 part. Anyway, I just was not sure if we had looked into the fire
Yeah,
access.
that hasn't, I mean, I think the road is conceived as usable by any vehicle,
Well, you're gonna have
including
to get
large construction vehicles,
up
so,
there,
yes.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
think
Just throwing
that
out.
it was assumed that, because the grade on most of the road is pretty low, so I don't
Okay.
think that would be an issue.
Just wanted to mention it.
And I
Thank you.
believe in other applications, the fire department has wanted to have some way of having access in case. So I'm assuming
Case they
we'll
have
hear
to,
that
yeah.
in their letter.
Right, we referred it to the fire department. So they should be commenting by May
Mhm.
11th.
Which district is this in?
Roosevelt.
Okay.
There's only Roosevelt and Hyde Park now, since Roosevelt.
True.
Yeah, it's in
Merged.
Roosevelt, that's.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Oliver?
I have no further comment to add. Thank you.
Ms. DiNapoli?
More of an inquiry. People who do traffic study, would they have any knowledge that would be pertinent to the difference between glare and glint, of how it would affect driving? Or is this just like way?
I don't know the answer. When I was doing all my research, so municipalities are interested in putting solar farms near airports or counties, states, whoever's operating the entity, because there's a lot of open land. And the big issue there is not actually glare for pilots, it's actually for the air traffic controllers in the towers. That's what's supposed to be avoided. That's the bigger issue. And I don't see anything when I'm trying to read up on the analysis.
Anyone who does traffic studies would have any
haven't-
knowledge.
But I should have added, Pete is looking around to see, just like we had discussed, if we get the cell tower application, because we would need a radio frequency engineer specialist, we found that person. You guys had a chance to see his resume, so he's looking to see if there's someone who can do more glare analysis.
Okay.
This case, it hasn't really arisen because there's nothing to cast onto. It's heavily treed around it, and they're proposing more screening. It's really, this is a discussion really more for the other example we have right now, or the other application we have ahead of us.
Wouldn't it be the same engineers who perform the glare analyses?
Well, the glare analysis that we had submitted was the applicant's engineer, so.
Oh, talking about our
Yeah.
peer review.
Yeah, peer review. So,
And I
anyway,
think
So
most
no
of
other
those
questions?
glare analyses are done via an online platform, like what's
Mhm.
standardized.
Right.
Yeah, there's a,
Right, but we
Forget who
need,
has
we
it,
need
but
someone to help
Sandia
Yeah.
National
explain it
Labs.
to the board.
Right.
that's really it,
Yes.
because none of us are engineers
Experts,
up
yeah.
here on it.
And I think, isn't it Sandia Labs that has the,
There are now,
if you
there's
go
now
purchase
more
it, the
than,
programs, algorithms to
Right.
do the evaluations?
that's
Yeah.
one of the platforms, and then I guess there's a new platform.
Okay, thank you. Let me go ahead and ask, would anyone like to speak about this application? Because the first person who signed up is Barbara Minholtz Shelton. Signed up to speak about this. Would anyone like to speak about this application from the public? If you do, just come on up and state your name for the record. Mr. ATHANAS.
Good evening. Mike ATHANAS, IG. Is this thing on?
It
Yes.
should be.
It's meant to be sat in front of.
Oh,
You can bend it down towards you a little bit.
Yep.
I'd like to address the glare issue, if I may. I drove up through Vermont about a month ago to a conference in Burlington. And along Route 7, there are many, many farms with solar arrays. And never noticed any glare potential at all. And their arrays were rolling with the contour of the land. So they followed the topography. They did not change the elevation of the fields that they were put on. And glare is, I'm a nut for light refraction. I worked in the research lab for 20 years where we did a lot of optical work. And light refraction is only at a moment of time where the emitting source of light, the light coming in, hits the reflector and bounces off. The sun is the earth is moving, the sun is still. So we're constantly in a rotational angle of the sun. So if there is a glare or glint problem, it would be only momentary.
That's what I'm trying to say is, in all these cases where we've heard objections to glare, I really meant you can't stop all glint, because it just depends on where you're sitting and the angle. You know, the sun, the earth, let me rephrase that, the sun doesn't travel. The earth travels around the sun, but at different times of the year, we have different angles.
Yes.
So it may be, in other words, that we had many members of the public were speaking against an application, not yours. You've heard no one here speak tonight. But the other one, there's no screening around it. There's no natural buffering. So the residents who are speaking against it happen to live about 30 feet up from the site. There's a severe grade change. It's on South Quaker. So for them, I was more or less saying, it may be that at some point you see a bit of a glint. But I use the term glare, and I use that incorrectly. So I'm doing a mea culpa and falling on my vocabulary sword tonight. That's all.
The other point I wish to state is that the solar array on 9G up on the Clinton line and Hyde Park line, it's right on the road.
Yep.
It's oriented, well, east and west. The arrays faced east and west, but the array faces south.
Mm-hmm.
And I've driven past that array all times a day, and I've never, ever had any
All of us have.
any glint or glare off of it.
As I said, all
Plus,
of us have.
the way this is set up, virtually my cousin that lives on the north side of the array field is the only one that's going to see it. And he's on the north side of the array field. They're facing away from him, and there's no possibility that there would be glare back at him.
No, we walk the site.
Yeah.
And I was surprised we were even clearing as much as 3.4 acres extra. I thought that the
Seemed pretty
majority
wide
of it
open.
seemed pretty wide open to me. But it hasn't been actively farmed, so there is some little,
There's some along
Okay.
here as well along the road. So
yep, that's true.
that adds to the.
That's true, that's fine.
So
But yeah,
that's
it's
what I
not
got to say.
specific
Thank
to
you for
your
that.
application. It's really, I was saying this because I have a feeling the neighbors are watching at the other site are watching this too, because they're all paying attention now to the solar farm application. So I'll be making the same comment when we get back to that next public hearing too.
But
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
comments.
And I think what Mr. ATHANAS is saying is very consistent with a lot of the speakers that we heard at the solar conference
Correct.
over a year ago. That glare is a concern or a fear, but that the actuality of the amount of glare is very minimal. And that's at least from a layperson's standpoint of reviewing these glare reports, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert.
So would anyone else like to speak about this application? Counselor?
Mr. Chairman, Board, James Horan, 130 Cream Street. Here to talk about another application, but I've known Mike ATHANAS for quite a while, and I've actually drafted a couple of solar laws, so I looked at the glare issue with respect to the Dutchess County Airport in the town of Wappinger. So for airports, there are some FAA requirements regarding glare, so I don't think this is necessarily in the airport zone with respect to that. I guess the other issue is being bald. I have a lot of issues. I now know it's glint and not glare, so.
You get some bonus points for that one.
So, but thank you for that. At least if people say my head is glaring, I don't have to.
It's glinting only.
It's only glinting. But to the point of solar panels in general, I've done a lot of work, research over the years regarding farming operations, and here in Dutchess County in New York State, I think farming operations are very, very important, and all of the research says that, farms to be sustainable need additional sources of income, particularly steady sources of income. One of the worst hazards of being a farmer is from year to year, depending on your crop, your prices vary, your costs remain the same, but your income is very variable. And to the extent that any farmer, Mr. ATHANAS or anyone else, has a steady stream of income that they can rely upon, although this is not necessarily as steady as they probably like, it's a good thing to keep farms to be sustainable. There are a lot of active farms in Hyde Park. I've been up to Mike's farm a number of times, and I wholly support any opportunity and ability to keep those farms to be viable operations. I know that Ag and Markets doesn't consider this to be an on-farm part of the farming operation because it's more than 110% of the usage. How you determine 110% of the usage gets to be a little bit difficult. But again, I think it's a very worthy proposition. So I wholeheartedly support this application, and I think the board should consider it favorably.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak about the application? So, we can put you on for the May 15th agenda, but not hold a public hearing necessarily. We can.
May 5th? May 15th.
Yeah, just
Yeah, May
to
15th.
consider seeker, if you can get us the narrative, and we can get new plans submitted sometime in the next week.
Okay, they
This-
wouldn't have
this
to meet the 15-day deadline then, or?
Once, uh-oh, yes?
Wait, so you're saying a submittal when and to have reviews ready by?
I don't think we're going to make any changes based on comments tonight.
Oh, okay, so they're not,
Are
you're
you
not
gonna-
replying
Are you revising
to
the plans further, because based on comments
Well,
tonight?
Did everyone see, there was
Not
also
a-
comments from CAC.
There's CAC comments that they haven't received yet, I don't believe. Conservation Advisory Council comments that just came in this evening.
Well, I sent it over to her, she may not have gotten them yet. She's prepping for
Yeah,
that.
Right.
attractions travel over stream. This is just the creek, sorry, we're on east.
I think they covered
the
it.
There were no comments
That's
on the
west.
east.
Yeah,
Right.
there's no comments on.
There are no comments from the
things
CAC on
Oh,
the
really?
east. Yes.
I thought there was
It's
a
on
comment
west.
on the road.
It's on west.
It's on the west one.
Oh, no, it is 1436, you're right.
just a point of clarification,
It
Yeah.
it
But they
says,
did cover putting
it
it.
You're
appears
right.
the road runs through the wetland, project is in the wetland buffer zone. Are there any proposed mitigations?
There
That's
is
what
no
the
wetland
CAC
buffer zone in this area. There's not a DEC
There is on the
wetland.
I think
west
they
one, though.
confused east and west.
No, we didn't send them west.
We didn't send it to
We
them.
didn't
We haven't
send it.
circulated.
Wow.
Right, so it has to be this one. And the
They are
road,
putting a culvert.
the road does run through the wetland. It's I guess I'll call it an intermittent wetland. We walk the site.
Yes, it's not a state jurisdictional wetland. Notification was provided to the Army Corps. They have a certain amount of time to respond. I am actually not aware of whether they have responded, but,
Right, well, the CAC's comment was directed at the planning board as lead agency, so something to consider is during the seeker review is whether
Of course.
there's any mitigation required.
So-
It's, the road has been used for years, you can tell, that runs through the existing wetland.
And they are proposing pervious for
Right.
the roadway.
Right. We're not trying to make a secret determination tonight. We're just pointing out some facts around it.
understood, I'm just thinking in terms of the timing, so.
I'll explain later on.
Okay,
We'll discuss after the meeting. How's that?
okay, that sounds
So if you can
great.
submit plans to us, if you're not going to revise them, you could submit the most
Tomorrow.
recent plans tomorrow. And the deadline, the 2-week deadline, is generally for when applications are new.
yeah.
We
Okay.
need the extra time.
Right.
But in this instance, I think that if you can get them to us quickly, then we can go ahead and review them, because once you're in the pipeline, we're familiar with where the areas that needed to be revised
Right,
are.
right.
So we can go right to them.
Okay. Now, a narrative in terms of traffic impact, that would
Sometime
be a
in the
new
next week.
item? Okay, all right.
Yep. That's not a new item. You're in the pipeline. And
Okay.
we've already seen the traffic numbers from the environmental assessment form. I'm just trying to get something that would
Yeah.
satisfy if they really want a traffic impact study.
Right.
I think maybe a traffic impact analysis should suffice, because the numbers are not high.
No.
And
Correct.
the only traffic you're really generating is temporary. You don't do I'm sorry, I'm lecturing and leading, but you don't do mitigation measures when it's temporary. That is the mitigation. It's temporary.
Right.
So the only time we had synchro analysis requested was
Or
really
for
for
the
when grocery
big
stores,
projects,
big
yeah.
projects that are going to really generate some traffic.
Drive-throughs.
Right.
There's
drive-throughs.
no need for a traffic impact study, I never would have requested that, or it's just not.
If I had false teeth, they'd have fallen out when I read the letter.
Well, so if you give us the narrative, and the narrative, the board can review it, and if nothing in there rises to the level of needing a traffic impact study, then the board can decide that that's not needed.
But we do need
Okay.
that input.
Yes.
Right, right.
But this review is just for seeker.
Yes.
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 Okay, all right.
Thank you very much.
So do you want to continue the public hearing for a month and then just put them on for a workshop
That's what I was doing,
in
is
2
to
weeks?
continue it for a month and put them on the workshop for the 15th.
Okay.
That way, we'll also have had some time to review the changes, and we
Yep.
can discuss those before we get them back out to the public.
So we are continuing, not adjourning it, we're adjourning it to June 5th?
Yes.
June 5th. Making a motion to adjourn this to June 5th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, and we'll placehold you on for the 15th, at the next meeting.
Okay, so we'd be in workshop mode on the 15th.
Yes.
And in continued public hearing on June
Fifth.
5th. Okay. All right, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, and you can stay up there,
Change it up there.
because you're also presenting the next application, which is what we call Cream Street Solar Farm. They're also seeking site plan approval as well as special use permit approval to site another solar array at 129 and 133 Cream Street. They're two parcels, but jointly owned by one individual who's here tonight, Mr. Osika. I'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Dana.
Okay, just in case it was, as anybody who wasn't here at the beginning, do introductions again. I'm Dawn Dana. I'm with Labella Associates, the consulting engineer for the developer, and with me is Adam Webb, the construction director for New York Solar 1000. Well, as Mr. Dupree said, this is another solar farm project located at 129 and 133 Cream Street, adjoining parcels. That's County Route 39 in the town of Hyde Park. The site, is it still on?
We can hear you.
Okay. Site parcels have a combined area of 62.2 acres that at present is used for agricultural purposes, and it's also within the Greenbelt zoning district. The project consists of 2 clusters of fixed tilt solar photovoltaic panels totaling 4.9 megawatts of output. The project area comprises 13.5 acres in total, and the array sites are more than 1,000 feet from Cream Street and at higher elevation. Other project elements include an access road entering at an existing driveway entrance at 133 Cream Street, utilizing, again, an existing farm road with minimal improvement to allow vehicle access. The access road will cross a stone wall between the north and south arrays at an existing opening. Each array for this project includes a concrete pad for a metal storage shed and the transformer and switchgear equipment. And again, the power output is converted from direct current to alternating current on rack-mounted inverters, an underground collection system within the array areas with overhead line, not shown on this drawing, but starting here, going north, and then continuing out west to the interconnection point with Central Hudson on Cream Street. The dimensions on those lines are 1,500 linear feet of underground line within the array area and 2,060 linear feet of overhead line with 10 power poles. Again, each array cluster is fully enclosed by a 7.5-foot black metal fence. The site preparation will include some tree clearing along the existing farm road and in portions of both of the north and south array clusters, with clearing totaling about 3.2 acres. We've used extensive vegetative screening for this project, essentially comprising the entire northern, western, and southern boundaries of the array sites to screen it from any adjoining residential properties. The screening, again, as with the other project, is comprised of eastern white pine and Norway spruce. We'll use a pollinator seed mix for disturbed areas outside the array and conservation seed mix for reseeding within the array. Continued agricultural use for animal grazing is planned for this property. And again, for the board, this drawing is responsive to comments we heard last month. Again, we made minor adjustments to the side yard setbacks, consulted with Liz about the revisions to the dimensions table, so I think that's all cleaned up, and we're all on the same page with that. We also added some, based on last month's comments, some additional vegetative screening. I think this area had not been filled and now will be. And the same situation with the transformer and switchgear equipment with illustrative detail only, which we understand is adequate. So.
Thank you. Let me go straight over to the consultants. Ms. Axelson, anything new?
No, nothing new.
Because we haven't seen anything new.
April 5th comments still stand.
Right.
And
Thank you.
I think I gave the board the highlights at the April 3rd meeting. So.
You did, thank you.
Look
Ms.
forward to
Polidoro,
that.
any other comments?
Well, I think we sent this one to DEC, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so, and we haven't heard back yet, just because they are within the wetland adjacent area, a portion of that road, so I want to hear what DEC says. Second, what's the difference between the conservation?
I'm sorry, can you speak into the mic?
Difference between the conservation mix and the pollinator mix?
I don't have the list of the mixes, but I think there's more flowering plants in the pollinator mix, which you wouldn't necessarily want to have in the.
I thought the understanding was that on these two applications, that the pollinator mix was going to be outside of the array.
That's
And
what-
the other
that's what
mix
she
was going to be
said, yep.
inside because.
Well, that's what she said, but I was asking what the other mix, what is it?
It's on our landscape plan, the detail of what's in each mix.
Okay.
I'm afraid I can't cite that.
I mean, is there a reason you're not using pollinators in both places?
The ecologist suggested that it would be best not to have it within the array. There's some discussion of potentially having goats within the array, and I think that was maybe not the best mix for those purposes.
We know goats shouldn't be because they can jump on top of them.
No, not goats, sheep, I'm sorry.
There you are.
Not
Yeah, sheep don't
goats,
jump.
yes. We had talked about goat misbehavior, but no, sheep, I'm sorry.
So you're still proposing, so the mix has to do with what the sheep will be eating?
That's my understanding. I can get you more detail on that if it would be helpful.
Just a quick aside, I don't think that we have the details of the conservation mix in our plans currently. We have the pollinator mix listed, but not the conservation mix.
Okay. All right. It's yeah, it is a DEC specified, so we can easily
Thank you.
provide the contents of that.
Anything else, Victoria?
That's it.
Ms. DiNapoli, any comments?
No comments.
Mr. Oliver?
No comments.
Ms. Dexter?
Nothing additional.
Ms. Wasser?
No further comment.
And Mr. Pickett?
No comment.
I don't really have any either. This is, I think we, at the last meeting, kind of pointed out that this is one of the least visible sites. It's really high up there, it's really far away.
Yes.
And you're proposing screening. The land happens to flatten out up in this area, which I can see why that makes it appropriate. But you don't even really have any, you have adjoining parcels that have houses, but when we walked the site, it was during leaf off, and we couldn't see anybody else. All we saw was the hunting, I think it was Hunter's Lodge, I guess we'll call it.
Stand, yeah.
An additional, like, small house that's on the site, but otherwise, there's nothing there. So let me open this up to the public. Would anyone like to speak about this application? Oh, did I not open the hearing?
Ah,
Making a motion to open this public hearing.
so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now would you like to speak about this application?
James Horan, 130 Cream Street. Live on the opposite side of Cream Street, which was the original farmhouse for this farm.
Oh, okay.
It was, I guess, our house was built was on the 1790 census. It was probably built sometime before that. Originally, this property was owned by the Kipp family, who married the Stoutenberg family. But anyway, the only issue, I've looked at the site plans online, and my comments regarding what I had said with respect to Mr. ATHANAS, the farm income, I think it's very appropriate. It's been farmed in Hyde Park for a very long time, and I'd love to see it continue as a farm. The one comment that I have is regarding the overhead line, which runs along the ridge. Would that be along the ridge line? From, I guess, up to the north end of the property line. My question is, would that be visible above the ridge line? It's,
Didn't
from
you
what
say
I
it
heard,
was
the
going-
I
discussion.
can,
So it travels
It
here
follows up the
and then
west-
goes
Right, yeah.
along the property line.
and I
So-
can get out a drawing that shows it if you.
Okay.
So my question is, and I don't know how high that line is. I mean, it's actually a pretty striking view at sunrise. You can see, it's a very nice view. And the one thing is, if that portion, as you come down the hill along the north property line, that's obscured by the view. The only question is, as you go from, basically parallel to the ridge line, if that line is above.
Do you mean this area?
Yes,
This is
exactly.
buried. This is buried, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's buried to here, then the overhead is here.
Well, on the site plan, it showed it was overhead.
This is overhead starting here.
Oh.
Right.
Oh, I thought that
Then it's
I heard
gonna-
the same thing. I thought it was
So you're-
buried up to the north.
Is that, Ms. Dana, is the line, overhead line on the outside of the screening? Because it should be on the inside of the screening.
It is at present, well, that's on a different plan. We're going to have to figure this out.
Get a couple of
obviously.
layers there
Yeah,
that
yes.
work together.
So the transmission lines, the overhead transmission lines are part of the principal use.
Right.
The solar farm. So anything that should be screened as part of the solar array
Right.
should be all screened.
Right,
So
and
you
that
need
may
to
well be the
locate
case.
that within somehow.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Wren, I hadn't looked at that. This is, I actually just pulled out the code because when you said that much overhead, in our zoning in 108-4.5, I-6, I think it is, it requires that
Yes.
in neighborhoods and hamlets, respective cores, landings and business districts, in new major subdivisions in the green belt and waterfront, which this is not a major subdivision, for all those circumstances, all electrical service, telephone, cable TV, similar, they all have to be buried. This, however, does not fall into that 'cause it's on a major subdivision, so there's no requirement to bury the lines here,
No, yeah.
except for possible visual impacts.
Right, and that was, and I mean, as far as the screening there, as you had mentioned, it's really not that visible. I don't think the screening, in some respects, I think if you put a large wall of
Right.
screening up there,
You
I
draw
think it
more
would
attention to it.
detract from what's there. And I think to the extent you had an underground line there and some lower bushes that would just screen the arrays themselves. Again, I don't know if this is kind of on the backside of the ridge line or not, but.
It's, once you get up there, it's pretty flat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it will be like basically not on the back side, this is on the,
Yeah.
toward the front side.
it'll be at
toward-
the peak.
Yeah,
It'll be at the peak.
yeah, it'll be silhouetted.
I wonder if if it could be dropped off to not be at the peak and down,
Down, yeah.
yeah.
Lower.
No,
Good
but
suggestion.
the only question I had was, and I think the overhead line is much higher than the arrays would be. That's-
Correct.
Correct, yeah.
And if you buried that, I don't think it would necessarily be an issue.
But we still, this is part of the application, so they should be, in other words, there should be screening of everything is sort of about it, to the extent practical. I don't think we're going to have you try to screen another side of the line as it goes up. That's not really practical because you'd be putting stuff inside your setback.
I mean, I think if you just buried the line on that portion, it'd be better than screening it.
Yeah, can you look at whether this line can, the line can be buried in through here? Thank you. That's a
Yeah.
great comment. And by the way, the reason I looked it up is I've been incorrect. I've been assuming that these needed to be buried, that they're not under our zoning.
Yeah.
And
Doesn't
I guess,
Central Hudson,
I looked at the Central Hudson distributed, and I guess there's three-phase on Cream Street. And so as far as the connection down on Cream Street, so the inverters are at the top, and it's just it would just be a connection down there at Cream Street? Okay.
We
And there's
have
no-
had pictures of those. I'm trying to remember if it looks kind of like some of those transformers.
Sure.
I mean,
No, but I mean, that equipment would be on the hill, it wouldn't be down the
Correct.
street.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
If it's on the street, they're required to show us because
Right.
they have to show us
Yeah, I didn't
all
see
the
it on the
appurtenances.
site plan, so
No,
I assumed.
no.
yeah.
For
What,
that matter, the site that's been commented negatively by the public, they also had put a lot of their equipment outside the screening too, on the street, which we told them you have to move that back inside.
So on Central Hudson, we've had some power outages and stuff. So I'm happy that, if Central Hudson comes in, it does work.
Maybe it'll help.
Yeah,
And,
right.
and also, if you're doing a community solar program and you're looking for people to sign up, send a letter across the street.
well, Central Hudson requires an overhead connection, but how far back? Do we know?
No, we haven't had guidance from them. Central Hudson would like to have everything overhead.
Right.
Right. All right, that's it.
Thank
All
you.
I have.
Thank you,
Thanks for
sir.
coming out. Want to come up and speak? Sure. Come on up.
So, good evening. I'm Chris Osika, and I'm actually the owner of those two properties. So they've actually been in my family since 1914. So they've been mostly continually farmed throughout that entire period, and obviously they were farmed much before that. By the way, the house is dates back much further than 1790. But I just want to reassure people that the intent is to keep that a operating farm by every measure. And I mean, I'm a developer, I develop properties in other places, and the idea very simply is that, I want to maintain that. There's sentimental value to the property, and frankly, this is probably the least invasive thing that I could possibly do. And, I looked in the past about putting electric up to the top, and quite honestly, as a private resident, it would have been right up the middle. And one of the things is that I wanted to remind everyone that fence line that we're putting the electric down there's a 40-foot high tree line along that. So all poles and everything would be completely masqueraded into that tree line.
Masquerade only during leaf-on season. When it's
Yeah.
leaf-off, those are all deciduous, if I recall. I went and looked.
They are, for the most part.
Right.
But I just want to reassure everyone about the farming, so trying our best to keep a operating farm in Hyde Park, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to speak? Please.
Okay, so, first of all, I remember that in our first round of review, we questioned the amount of overhead lines because in the applications we'd seen before this, we weren't seeing that extent of overhead line. And the explanation of the response had to do with, this is Central Hudson's requirements. Not really clear why, so if there's any chance to revisit that point and come back with additional explanation or reaffirmation, that would be great.
Yeah, and I just note in section 130-8, it does require that power lines be placed underground to extent practicable. So
Okay.
you'd have to show that Central Hudson is requiring it to be above ground.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine, that's fine. And then, the issue of the seed mixes, just a couple points of clarification. I went back to the prior response letter, which talks about the bee pollinator seed mix being used on the seeded areas outside of the fenced solar array. Within the array, any disturbed areas will be seeded with DEC-approved conservation seed mix number 6. And on the landscaping plan, it says seed mix number 6. Just doesn't happen to say New York
What's
State
that?
DEC.
What's in the,
Conservation mix. So that's in there, but I think I'd like to hear from the board. Victoria and I were just discussing this about how you feel about that in terms of, is there a preference for bee pollinator mix all the way through? And is that something that the applicants, folks, should go back, figure out if there's anything can be done about that or if it needs to stay as proposed? So some input from the board would be,
I
think,
suggest that we not answer that tonight, think about it, but
Okay.
more importantly, we should know what the conservation mix is.
I was going to ask, what's the title of it again?
It's called, DEC-approved conservation seed mix number 6, and it consists of the following:
Oh,
creeping red fescue. I'm not going to try to figure this out. The rate in pounds is 20 pounds per acre. Chewings fescue, 20 pounds per acre. I think I'm reading this correctly, correct me if I'm
So those are
wrong.
grasses.
Perennial
Those are all
ryegrass,
They're all
5
grasses.
pounds per acre, and red clover,
they're native grasses.
right.
They're native grasses to stabilize, that's all.
So that was the whole point, and I think when we did our first review, we said we'd like to see bee pollinator mix everywhere. We had this response in the response letter, and, my take on it was that they had a certain judgment about how they wanted this to be planted and with the animals, so as soon as they explained that, I didn't ask again. But if the board has strong feelings, that's something you should talk about at some point.
Well,
Okay.
how likely are you to actually use animals? Because, are there already animals on the farm, or will you be
Yes.
hiring
It's actively farmed.
Yes.
yes,
with sheep?
No.
not with sheep.
They have cows,
So, well, you're not putting cows in there.
horses.
So, would you be, we generally ask for a landscape management plan, and I think right now it talks about mowing twice per year.
It
Correct.
It doesn't.
It doesn't
actually-
talk about the
It
sheep.
doesn't specify that yet.
Okay, so I think if you are gonna do sheep, we're gonna need some kind of management plan explaining how often the sheep will be coming in, et cetera, or the mowing.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think that, I'm just going to guess on this, but DEC has a horror, as we all should, of invasive species. And depending, if you have pollinators, some of those are going to spread. It may be that they're preferring to see native grasses in an area like this instead. We can have pollinators around the area. That's all I'm guessing. I'll do some research into it as well, talking to the DEC. If it's their suggestion, then I think we would defer to
I
them.
don't think it's their suggestion necessarily. I think that's just a seed mix that they use
an
for
option.
stabilization.
Because that's what it would do, is stabilize everything, particularly the red
And
clover,
help to
because that spreads
prevent
quick.
the invasives.
sheep
Yeah,
like
and
grasses.
Yep. So, board members think about that?
Good, it's a good question. I'm just wondering if you surround it with pollinators and you stabilize the interior, over time with the spreading of seeds, it might gradually
They will come
migrate
through.
and the pollinators will end up taking over or at least mingling with the native
Infiltrating.
grasses. Infiltrating.
Derek, it's your decision as to if any animals are grazing it, correct? And right now, I didn't think you were planning on it. I thought you were planning on mowing. Thank you.
The plan would be to mow.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not have sheep.
If it was requested that people wanted to see sheep to help graze, then the ability to have sheep is there. But the plan would be to mow.
But the plan is to
Yeah.
mow.
Okay, so
Interesting.
then, see, you guys can think about the seed mix. and
We
what
will.
Okay,
preferences.
thank you for that.
We will. Any other questions or comments from the board or consultants or the audience? Then, would you like us to adjourn this as well to the June 5th meeting? And we can, so these plans were revised slightly from what we've seen as well? So you're going to submit these this week as well? So, do we want to put them on for a workshop on the 15th so we can discuss the revisions?
It's up to the board.
Well, they're going to be here anyway.
Yeah, they're gonna be here anyway.
Okay, may I get a motion to adjourn the public hearing to June 5th?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, we'll see you back in 2 weeks.
So again, the new plans have to be submitted within the week.
Yeah, we
in
should
order to
get
be
the new
discussed.
plans like as soon as possible.
Yes, right.
So
Thank you.
they're not coming back for a workshop in 2 weeks?
They are.
They are. Public hearing on 4.
The next item on the agenda is a continued public hearing for Nichols Oxygen property. Mr. Nichols is seeking approval for site plan and special use permit to expand the scale of an existing property. In essence, we're taking some empty buildings, putting some auto repair and auto sales on the site. At the last meeting, we requested some revisions, including the addition of a storage area in the back to scale. But the biggest issue was that we were waiting. DC Planning had responded to suggesting consolidating the curb cuts. The fire department was okay with the layout. We had not had a response from DOT at that time. However, we did receive a letter from DOT, I think just today, in essence requiring to read from the letter, summarizing, upon development of the site as proposed, a single non-mountable curb access will be required along with drainage facilities and verification of minimum site distance. If the assigned fire company determines this access is not suitable, the department would allow a mountable curb with a concrete pad, I presume to stage, like the portable ponds, et cetera, behind it. So let me turn it over to you gentlemen. Mr. Terums, we missed you last meeting.
Oh, wish I was here. Well, we just received a letter this afternoon ourselves. So we've been, discussing, options to close off one of the 2 entrances to the property. I think we'll continue, we'll have some ideas. The department mentioned mountable curb. And that's an option. We're wondering, we'll probably run past them if we could just remove pavement and plant grass maybe, or if they want a physical barrier with a curb.
The letter was pretty brief. It doesn't really say
No.
a lot, to be honest with you.
No.
And they don't specify which entrance, so I think that's up to you to make that decision and the planning board. But if I recall, there's 2 Mr. Nichols out here tonight. The senior Mr. Nichols, I'll say, did say that the one that's further north is primarily used to access the buildings, and the one that's south is kind of used to access the whole site. In addition, in a letter sent from the fire department to the DOT, it was noted that there was recently, I believe, a cyclist accident, maybe fatality.
They had to shut down the road.
And they shut down 9G for a while, of which this site was used to cycle traffic around in and out. But that seemed to have fallen on deaf ears to the DOT, which now that I think about it, is where you work, Mr. Terrams, as well. So you may understand some of their thinking better than we do.
You know, it's not my department, so not really. But, I mean, it's functioned safely and worked well for as long as these buildings and this property has been developed. So I kind of scratch my head at it, but not my decision. So we'll work with them to come up with something, you know, agreeable to them. We'll address their issues of sight distance out of there, which there's plenty in both directions.
I'd say so. That's a pretty even level area.
Right?
Not much curve or anything, so.
Yeah,
but
they
I think
didn't say much.
that seems to be boilerplate language that was added as well.
Yes.
Not that I'm criticizing your agency.
Should have built a solar farm, I think it's easy.
Now if you have to do a traffic impact study, those are like $10,000 to $15,000. That's why dentures fell out when I read it, because I don't understand how the traffic, I don't. The traffic doesn't, I can't even imagine what traffic they're looking at to do a traffic impact study when
Right.
it's just construction that'll be temporary. But I'm looking at you because of course you work there, but you don't know the answer either. so.
No, well, the DOT required a traffic impact.
That's what they,
For the
they're saying
previous,
for a
they
previous.
farm.
asked that one be submitted.
Along with the sink
Okay,
analysis.
not my department again.
What department do you work in?
I'm the regional structures engineer. I'm in charge of all bridges. So
Oh, right.
Good to know.
Yep.
bridges are my worry. The traffic maintenance is not my concern at this
Okay.
point.
Pretty important.
Do you have a preference to which entrance remains
yet.
open?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Discussing it back and forth here, and we'll have to submit a plan to you. Because either way, there's problems, okay?
Problem.
And can I just throw in here that this is one of the most confusing, very brief letters we've ever received, because the first paragraph, it explicitly says, sometimes 2 driveway access points are allowed if a safety issue can be supported and sufficient separation between the driveways can be provided. Well, but if they wrote,
Italicize and underline.
but excuse me, if they
I-
wrote this
I think-
before they received the letter from the fire department saying,
No,
this
No,
is,
they
they
wrote-
wrote
this
it
is,
after.
this is written to
I
them.
mean, the implication, it's unsaid, is that there's not enough distance between the two. I mean, that's
but,
what I
but,
read.
but this is what I'm talking about. It is it's for such a brief letter, it actually raises way more questions than they might, it doesn't satisfy anything for
But we're
me.
not criticizing the agency.
No, not at all. I'm just confused.
I actually think it's clear because it says "and." So yes, there may be a safety issue, but there is the separation issue, because it's not saying or either
Right.
or, and/or. It's saying both of these things need to be satisfactorily addressed. That's how I read the letter.
But if you drive down Route 9G, you'll see plenty of driveways that are that far apart from each other.
How far
So,
apart are they?
so I am
used to-
confused. I continue in
It's-
my confusion.
I believe they used to approve these kinds of things, but because traffic has increased since the 70s, 80s, when a lot of these were approved, and they require, just like Department of Health, they've asked us if there's a change of use under our code to send it over to them.
Yeah, I'm just,
We're going to get into this with BOLANDER as well. We referred BOLANDER because under our code, a change from the residential care facility to family housing, multifamily, is a change in use. The Department of Health sent us back a letter just recently clarifying that to them, it's not a change of use, so they're not going to review
Okay.
the septic system.
How
So-
far, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
same number of
How far
bedrooms and
apart are the
bathrooms, right?
driveways?
I don't know, do you know the distance between the two driveways?
I was there today. It was pretty close. It's like 20 feet.
Probably
Yeah.
25, 30 feet.
Well, by the scale, it's a big 50, 60 feet.
50, 60?
Yeah,
That
I mean,
far?
that's-
The green strip in between the two curb cuts?
Yeah.
Is that far?
Big.
I don't know, it's out there today, I didn't measure it.
So you
Pretty
can't just
close.
open it up and make one big driveway?
No,
No,
they wouldn't
because-
allow that
Really
either.
big.
Okay.
So there's the Verizon main lines for that North Park area reside in that island. That's why that island's there.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
Each entrance is 30 foot wide,
Yep,
so it's about a 60-foot swath between the two entrances.
thank you. Anything else you want to add?
We need
I know you're going to be making some revisions and discussing this with DOT, I assume, with Chuck?
I will leave NICHOLS to discuss this with DOT, so it's not a conflict of interest for me.
Oh, right,
Um,
sorry. Sorry.
But I will be,
Following their guidance, whatever they work out.
yes, and then we'll, for some reason, last time I submitted it, I think I did address Liz's comments in the plan, so I'll just go through and make sure they're all addressed, and then we'll provide on the plan set our solution to the DOT's letter here,
That makes sense.
and then we should come in for hopefully site plan approval.
That's all that's all that has to be resolved that I see left, if you answered Liz's comments as well.
Have you done a submittal since April 15th? I don't think,
No.
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 Okay.
He's saying he has addressed them in what he will be submitting, but he hasn't submitted because
Gotcha.
no reason to submit if they have to revise everything all over again
Right.
with,
Save on killing trees and
yes.
So-
submitting things.
If the DOT indicates that you do have to close one,
They have already indicated that.
well, I know that, but I don't know if you're going to have any success in changing that. So let's assume that one of the driveways has to be closed. Then it's a matter of how does it get closed? And I guess there are a number of ways of demarcating, a closed driveway. I understand that ripping up pavement is one way of going, and I don't know if there are other options that would be acceptable to New York State DOT that might be a little more aesthetically pleasing than just simply ripping up pavement and putting down lawn. So those are just some thoughts. I don't know if the board has any input on that, if.
I'm going to guess if the department does not waver on their decision here, that there's curb there's curb that wraps the flag grass area, and there's curb on the other side, connecting the concrete curb together would probably be their
Preference.
what we end up with, and maybe behind the curb planting grass or something like that, or just leave it closed. They mentioned a mountable curb connecting the two. Ray'd like to discuss it with them because it does, either way, it's on DOT property, so it's highway work permit, it's, going through all that formality.
So I apologize that this is taking a little bit longer than what you anticipated, but that's what happens when you get sometimes state agencies involved that have a lot of authority. So anything else you'd like to add? Any
No,
comments
we
from?
need- we need to open the hearing.
Did I not open? I'm really lax tonight. Make it a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Sorry, I'm not.
Mr. Owen, would you like to
either.
speak about this application? I didn't think so. So there's no one in the audience to speak. Any additional comments?
I already
Additional
discussed.
comments? So we have to adjourn this rather than close it because we're going to be providing us with new plans. Do you want us to put this a month out? June 5th? To give you time with DOT, or do you want it longer?
Well, the other option is May 15th.
You're not going to have, do you think you're going to have a chance to submit revised plans based on DOT input by that point?
No.
Yesterday.
That was due yesterday, right?
So June 5th, do you think that's enough time to give you guys time to work with DOT?
Yes.
The only reason I say this is, every time we open and close public hearing, you're getting charged for the time from consultants to escrow. So I'm just trying to reduce your costs. If we open a public hearing and there's no comment, but we don't have new plans yet, there's no reason to do it. So yes to June 5th?
Unless we do it.
Yes.
The problem I have, the person that wants to move in takes 30 days for him to get his equipment.
Right.
And he's just waiting and waiting and waiting. I don't know, can he start without?
No. Or if, that would not, no, someone would, you'd be getting a violation letter, I think. So,
Who else are you waiting for besides DOT?
that's it. This is the last really issue. I mean, we haven't seen Paul's new plans to make sure that Liz's
Right,
comments were
Liz had
addressed.
a bunch of, like, technical comments on the plans themselves, so assuming they get cleaned up.
My point was you'd have an indication, you might have an indication sooner than June 5th for information to give to your future tenant. I don't think they could start the work, but they'd have a better idea of it
Good
once you
point.
spoke to DOT. If once you resolve DOT, the remaining item is to come here, you could sort of give them some more specific information about how to get ready.
I mean, we could put it on for 2 weeks with the risk that, you know, if you don't get the plans in by Friday, that.
They'd have to be in by
won't ready
Friday.
anyway.
You'd have to work with
And
DOT very
honestly,
quickly.
If I can echo what Michael's saying, rushing to get a submittal in and then not having everything addressed just means more consulting time.
Right.
I'd rather have a submittal come in with almost everything addressed and,
I mean, you could submit the current revisions, but then you'd have to resubmit based on DOT, which costs you more money again. Okay. Making a motion to adjourn this to June 5th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And just keep us posted about DOT.
Yeah.
You have my email. Let me know where you are and what they say.
and I'm assuming offline consultation is appropriate.
Absolutely. If you, in other words, if you need to have a meeting with us, Paul, you know, we'll set something up for the afternoon after you're off from work.
Okay, either that or we can just email.
Which you can do as well.
Yeah.
Email, call, whatever is.
I will, when all Liz's comments, and I'll double check that I've addressed them all, I'll email her a PDF plan set, just so we can.
Copy
through
Cynthia.
Yes.
So
Through Cynthia,
I guess I'll
so we
just
can
throw this
verify.
out here, if you really are in a rush, you could just say that when you resubmit the plans, show us plans with the closed curb cut that DOT, that's approvable by DOT, then you can get your tenant in and you can come in for a site plan amendment later if that
That's
doesn't
true.
work.
That's
But-
what I'm saying, if you can get through DOT, you
But-
can move forward.
Just remember
Is
that a
it-
site plan amendment
Is the
costs the same
DOT
thing as
gonna
a site
review
plan.
the resubmitted site plan? Does it go?
Based
does it
on their
go-
letter, they don't say that that they have to be sent back to them. But I would think that if you work out something if they work out something agreeable to DOT, then I don't think they'd be reviewing it because they'd have already stamped its approval, more or less. I mean, a condition we would normally make would be,
Usually we say DOT.
Conceptual approval.
Approval as a condition of approval, so you're done with us and you can go away. But we can't do that without knowing whether you're gonna close one or not. So we just need, you need to give us your final plan and then we can send you off.
So, if you would indulge me for 1 second.
Please.
If we were to submit everything by Friday, but just put a markdown DOT approved closure,
no, you'd have to
You have
show
to show us what,
it being closed and how it's closed.
yeah.
and how it's the method? Okay.
Because all that would have to be in the site plan. Tad would not accept as de minimis if it just says DOT approval.
Right,
She
but if
didn't know
you
what
show the
that
curb
was.
cut and whatever you're gonna do.
Okay.
So if by some miracle you could get an answer by close of, it would have to be something close of business Friday?
You'd have to talk, they'd have to talk to them tomorrow.
And-
The
Yeah,
board
and then
tonight is
modify
scheduling
the
the hearing for
plans.
June 5th, unless you want to schedule it for the May 15th or.
We've already adjourned.
We've
to
already,
the fifth.
yeah, I
Yeah,
can't
we're
imagine
done.
that you'd have time to do that with DOT unless, I mean, it usually takes a while to get into their schedule to have a meeting at the Burnett office.
June 5th is a safer way to go.
Exactly, yep. Yep.
Let me put it this way, whenever I call to meet with the resident engineer, it usually takes about a week. That's for me, the Lilly Planning Board Chair. They don't like me, you're right. But I never criticized them, the agency.
They never
We-
watch these.
We're happy to work with them. I know Mr. Walter does. He lives here in Hyde Park. No, thank you, and if I can be of any further help, just let me know. All right? Thank you.
Congratulations, Dan.
Thank you.
All right.
Ah, yes. Yeah, it's Saturday.
Okay, other business?
Are you reviewing the solar projects?
We have BOLANDER property. The applicant received approval for site plan. They have not had time to meet all the conditions. So we're offering an extension. We have the resolution prepared. Just a note, the condition that hadn't been met was Department of Health. And again, that's because under our code, the conversion was a change of use. But the most recent letter from Department of Health says that under their code, it's not a change of use. So they're okay with the septic as it is. So I think
Great.
they've met the condition.
Yeah.
But the other condition they have to meet is payment of all fees and escrows, which Victoria will be sending a bill for tonight, as well as Liz, but for tonight and for writing the resolution. So we have to make sure there's enough escrow for Victoria's most recent services. So who is this application?
I do.
Thank you.
Resolution granting extension of the time to satisfy the conditions of site plan approval, BOLANDER renovation, May 1st, 2019, Resolution 2018-43B, whereas, now therefore be it resolved that the planning board hereby grants the applicant a 90-day extension of time in which to satisfy the conditions of site plan and special use permit approved to and including September 3rd, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. The next item on the agenda is Jeffrey Groves Estates. This would be a one-year extension to, wait,
Setting a public hearing for an extension.
I'm sorry, this
time
is setting a
period.
public hearing. What am I saying? May I get a motion to set a public hearing for the extension of time to begin and complete construction?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Public
Aye.
hearing for what
on
day?
May 15th, May 15th, sorry.
All right,
Thank
second.
you. As a reminder to the board, you can be granted, the board can grant two 190-day extensions in which, 180, in which to meet conditions, but once it's signed, they're supposed to start a year on the construction, and they haven't had an opportunity to do so. So those require public hearings. The next item on the agenda, Mr. Owens is seeking a site plan waiver for the addition of a garage located at his residence at 4419 Albany Cross Road. This is interestingly in the Crossroads Core District, and it's the first application we've had.
Oh, wow.
And Ms. Moss and Ms. Polidoro did a lot of sort of head scratching about it because they don't make a distinction between residential uses and any other use in the
Oh,
area.
right.
In addition, we probably don't want them to single that out because this is a good area for B&Bs. So the recommendation for the waiver notes that the character of the proposed garage looks like a barn that would date to the same time period. It does not prevent full build-out. So if you've had, that's something that's required, oddly enough, to show. I can't imagine you building a whole bunch more on there, but it doesn't preclude you from doing that. You could if you wanted. So, and by the way, if you've all had a chance to look at the elevation, it's really
They're
pretty.
gorgeous.
It's quite nice.
Very nice.
Is it going to be just a garage? You're going to use it occasionally, like for dinners or something?
Can you come speak into the mic?
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what's the difference between?
Summer, I'm gonna use it for dining.
I could tell because of the way everything opens
Yeah.
up.
With the
Oh.
porch,
Yeah,
with the porch
because
looking
I
at
see.
the
garage
back.
doors on each side, barn doors
Yeah.
that
Nice.
roll open, so you can see completely through it. So yeah, and the inside's gonna be like a rough hewn wood, so we'll have that old charm look to it.
Nice.
So yeah, al fresco dining.
That's what I'm looking at. I was like, this looks like it could be used for something else like they do in the Hamptons, where they don't need garages there very often.
Yeah, you only use it during the winter.
So they become and they don't have the same severity of winters we have there because they're in a different zone. So it's the occasional hurricane or rare snowfall that you see people have to move furniture around and cram their cars in. But in your case, you won't have to really move much because it's just,
That's right.
that's what I thought, because the way it's open, I thought that'll be really nice back there.
Yeah, really looking.
And let's recall, you're not actually adjacent to the Vanderbilt estate. There's Doty Park
Right.
in between, but you can see right over to the Vanderbilt estate. So it'd be a lovely view as you're dining.
Yeah.
So,
I met Ed, your shed maker, today.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
He's a good guy.
Yes, nice
He's
work.
based here in Hyde Park. He does a lot of great work.
Ed the Shed Maker?
Yes, I walked to the site and he was working there and showed me his work.
Yeah, he does a lot of she sheds too, so.
Oh, she sheds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, that's,
I do.
it's the opposite of a man cave.
I know what a man cave is. I know what a she shed is, believe it or not. Yes,
Never heard of
it's
that?
a sanctuary
She
for
shed.
I
go off and
always
read.
get
and-
educated when I come to these meetings.
Opposite of the man
She should,
cave.
yeah.
Mine's called a Zen
Very
Den.
glamorous.
Yeah, Zen Den.
Is it?
Who has this, who has this resolution?
I do.
What is yours called?
Like a dollhouse.
Site plan waiver, Town Code Section 108-9.4C2, May 1st, 2019, Resolution 2019-15, whereas now therefore be resolved that the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board hereby waives site plan requirements for the file entitled John Owens Garage regarding the specific request as submitted in the building permit application dated March 8th, 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, can't wait to, we won't really,
Yeah.
you're not really gonna see it from Route 9.
No.
No, you're wrong.
No.
Maybe I'll have a party.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Love to see it because,
The good thing is, you know, with Dottie Park back there, you've got Dottie Lane back
Yes,
behind
yeah,
you,
you got
and
it.
it's the perfect spot to kind of park back there. You
No,
go
it
in a
is.
circle
Yeah.
and then come in the back gate.
it is.
Yeah.
Just when I saw it, I was like, this is a great location for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. All right.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And welcome to Hyde
And
Park.
thanks also for investing more in our town.
Mhm.
Next item on the agenda, has everyone had a chance? I heard back, I think, from 3 of my colleagues on the letter to the town board regarding the moratorium on cell phone towers.
Yes.
Well, and all telecommunications. So
Very well
briefly-
written, as usual.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure that they're going to be able to do in 6 months, actually change Chapter 101 to deal with 5G technology. But it is something that if,
It needs to be addressed.
yeah, I don't think it'll take so long for them to change the law, although there is a lengthy process to change laws. You have to hold a public hearing. It has to be on
Notice the other
it has to be on the,
municipalities.
it has to be on the town board's desk for so many days before they sign. They have to be able to see it, so. But I wanted to get this out because they've set the public hearing, I believe, already for it. And this will allow them, if they don't hear it, to go ahead and take action. And on 5G technology, I just want to reiterate, this really isn't meant to improve. It's going to be these small little boxes. I think they're
They're
3 by
often
3 by
called
3.
cantennas
Yeah.
because they're small cell antennas. And so you see them, they've been putting up a lot in the village of Fishkill on Route 9 and those places. They're even hard to notice. They're on telephone poles. It's just another structure on a telephone pole. The issue is that everyone wants to put their own pole up. So you're going to have
Right.
a proliferation of telephone poles up and down the right of way.
So we're trying, we want to
So
do,
they can be
basically,
sited on buildings, on rooftops.
Well, we did that with, here in town, didn't we, with
that's
the
what we've done is,
Verizon building?
yes, we already approved, and has a good memory because I remembered it too, that was a prototype that
God, that's-
Verizon
and
put
that's
up.
years ago.
And we asked them, what is this for? Yeah, it was like 4 years ago. I said, what is this for? And they said, it goes short distances. And at the time, I thought, why do you want a short distance?
It's like a hotspot or something.
But now I realize that people are walking around on.
Sure.
They want internet access constantly, and this will provide that. So I understand it, and I think that you're not going to see this, as I wrote, in the rural areas. You're going to see it more in 9 and 9G
It's
in
also
the center
where
areas.
cars are at traffic lights,
Yep.
right? People are on their phones. And so when you get a whole bunch of cars stacked in a large parking lot with people on their phones, it drains the service, so they need to add.
Well, now
those
the
kinds of
cars
antennas.
have Wi-Fi.
Right,
There's more people
right.
texting.
My car has its
than
own
cars.
Wi-Fi, but that noted, I was in the city, in New York City on Monday in our neighborhood where we at least keep our apartment if we never use it. But I looked around to see if there were 5G boxes, and there are. And I did forgot to take a picture of it because I was so surprised when I finally saw it. I hadn't noticed. It's on an existing light pole, or
Okay.
traffic pole, I'm sorry, intersection, traffic light pole. And it looks sort of like it's decorated, if that's the right term, or it's clad with something that looked like the speaker from an old Victrola. It's got like little, in other words, I thought, yeah, and I hadn't noticed it. I
Like a
thought,
speaker.
well, that looks kind of
Like an
nice
old
up there, but
radiator.
why would they, yes, I'm like, why would they do that? I thought, oh, New York City, they must have decided that they had to have some aesthetics. But beyond the aesthetics, I think what the town board will consider is requiring co-location rather than new poles.
And building, I've seen them on the sides of buildings or on
buildings.
rooftops, and I think, you don't notice them as much as what.
Which is why this would be a co-location, because it'd be that way on an existing pole or structure.
Because they can't go on poles that already have any equipment on them. So if it has electrical equipment on it, they can't use it. It can only have the wires. So
That's why I think in the city it's on the traffic,
Yeah.
because that's just there to hold the light. And being New York City, there's a traffic light every
Every corner.
block, so that's an easier
Right.
site than it say is here. But, and I didn't even look to think about buildings. There may be some in the buildings around the same area too. I just hadn't noticed.
I have
So-
a question about, just a point of information for me. Who actually drafts the language of these laws?
That was
Is
the
it
town
you?
attorney. No, the town attorney drafted the law.
The town attorney will be drafting the language.
He has drafted the moratorium language.
But you mean how to change the actual chapter 101?
Yeah.
So there's a variety of ways. Years ago.
Will we see that draft language?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
There will be
No, we're
required to
completely
comment on
involved,
it.
yeah.
We
Okay,
have-
I was curious who drafts it and make
So,
sure we see it.
like, for example, years ago, after watching Williams Lumber have to go through a lot of gyrations to increase the size of its letters, I decided we should update the sign code, and the town board then appointed a committee. The committee was Chan Murphy, me, Ruth Masuda, Bob Baxter, Victoria Polidoro, Herb Sweet from the ZBA.
Jeff Herslinger.
Jeff Herslinger, because he's a sign
Kate. Look
at your memory.
expert. Well, I'm trying.
Kate.
And Kate Hinn Schaefer, because these were both our sign people. So we worked really carefully on it that's what created the language where we get to say, the planning board as opposed to the ZBA, if it's set so far back
can
from the
relax
primary
this,
road,
yeah.
we can give them increases. If it's also appropriate based on the size of the building or the design speed. We all carefully worked on that. So and oftentimes there's a committee appointed.
Yep.
Other times, if it seems simple, then it is just the attorney who can do the fix. And the attorney generally, we did too as a committee, looks at other sort of best management practices, looks at other towns to see what their codes are like. A good example is, I've been looking at, 2 other towns have adopted solar array laws like ours. We were the first. The town of North, and ironically, Mr. Raplansky drafted all 3, or wrote all 3, but the town of Northeast has something that I think would probably allay some neighbors' fears, which it requires, right now, solar farms have the same setbacks for front and side that everything does. They require a 100-foot setback from a property boundary.
Oh, interesting.
Which also then means that there's probably going to be some
Has to be-
natural.
And it has to be a larger
Plenty of room
parcel.
It has to be a
for-
larger
Yeah.
parcel.
Plenty of room for a buffer, too.
And that allows you more room for a
Yeah.
buffer. In addition, Northeast, they say that the planning board can require even a bigger setback if will preserve the rural character, I think, because Northeast, that's a big, huge deal. That's what draws their weekend residents there, is the rural character of the community. So at some point, I'm going to likely be recommending that they could take a look at it just to
I really like that idea.
add a few tools that I think would make
Yeah.
it better for us, to that one as well. For that matter, I did have a brief meeting today, they may be taking that up, but they asked me for some more questions, some more input on it, so, but, yes.
But yeah, and I was just going to add to you that Hyde Park, has had major zoning revisions. And many people have sat on many committees. When we
Yep.
both came on,
Yep.
I was on another committee
Yep.
to help just like clean up the zoning
Yep.
where it said shalls and shoulds and,
In other words, if you want to be on a committee and do more volunteering, we can arrange that.
absolutely.
Because
we
I gotta tell you,
know-
the sign code revisions took us almost 4 months of
That is
meeting.
one of the most difficult ones.
It's very difficult. And by the way, I won't put that on the record. At
Do
any
we-
rate,
Do we know,
Incremental improvements.
they take a long time, actually. Do we know what samples the town is looking at in terms of cell tower and antenna laws?
I don't.
Okay.
I have a recommendation. We have to, or is there a need to review FCC preemptions to make sure that we don't get crosswise with any of their
Yeah,
requirements?
That's going to be, that'll be done by Mr. Raplansky, the attorney.
Okay.
The FCC primarily regulates time we have to review.
Heights, there's a lot of things. I know a town that got crosswise and sued and by the FCC.
Well, so
and
the
just got
town
blown
can
away.
adopt zoning regulations on height. The problem is the standards for variance are different because it's treated as a public utility. So even if the town says you can't have a tower higher than 50 feet, it's much easier for that utility to get a variance up to 150 feet. They don't
Right.
have to use the same criteria.
I might add, there's no height requirement, there's no height restriction for cell phone towers. This chapter does not.
Currently.
Currently.
Yeah.
This chapter does not have that.
Because of the FCC.
Cell
Or
cell
the
towers,
town
they
that
are a
got
public
crosswise with
utility.
them.
Even,
Yes.
even the little 5G antennas
Right.
are considered a public utility.
Actually, Mr. Sweet is the one who drafted the telecommunications. He worked on this because he's a ham radio operator and likes this stuff. And he deliberately did not want to put a height restriction in for cell phone towers because,
He
and,
wants better reception.
yeah, also, I'll add, I didn't put it in here, but right now, this chapter requires that they're camouflaged. I'm gonna just say straight out.
How do you
100%.
do that?
A 180-foot tree? We don't really have trees that grow that tall around here.
But that's not the only kind of camouflage. I mean. you know.
Mirrors?
I mean, no, monopoles can be made to be less visible. They don't have to have the, you know, Jersey pine or whatever you want to call it.
I don't know why they don't paint in the same color as the bottom of, not commercial, but military aircraft. So when you look
Light
up, it's a
gray.
blue gray and you
It's
can't
light
see
gray,
it.
yeah.
Paint the solid towers the same thing.
In other words, instead of just saying camouflage, they may be tweaking that section to say camouflage and then offer examples.
I mean, finishes can change the visibility,
Mhm.
shape.
Mhm.
And I see that since what we saw in the pending application was a La Tour Eiffel, the
Yeah.
Eiffel Tower look with the lattice.
Lattice.
And you seem to be definitely preferring monopole. We have to find out once it's put in, what that would be, why they made the difference, because I didn't see that in the application for the monopole.
Well, the other thing I would suggest, a couple communities I work with have, I've written these, but the last one I wrote was a long time ago, in '96. But, you know, to include alternative site search as a possibility
That
as
is-
part of the review, because,
That is already that's in the chapter. That's addressed in the application as well, why they looked here, 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 and here, and couldn't do it, that it needs to be right here. That's why we needed the RF engineer, because it says that they go lower, they lose service, and the loss of service is heaviest in the neighborhood that it's next to, which I don't quite understand, but maybe because it's on a lower ridge line than that. I didn't get it, but I'm not an RF engineer either.
well, Pauling had a situation where they asked for an alternative site search, and what the applicant offered wasn't terribly extensive. So the planning board, you know, we came up with some criteria for parcels, and we gave them a list of parcels to examine. It didn't take a lot of time, and they ended up finding a better site for their own purposes in terms of coverage. So that it can actually be a kind of collaboration, can make things better for everybody in the long run.
Well, if we get the application, I mean, it won't be submitted, I don't think, with a moratorium, but I don't know when they were planning on submitting it anyway. There was no timeframe they mentioned when we met for the pre-app meeting. But again, this isn't, the real central thrust of it is that even though the planning board does site plan and special use permit, since SUP is always tied to a site plan, somehow we didn't carry it forward into this section of the code, and no one's noticed.
It's a different chapter.
I would say
It's
it's a
not
different
part of the
chapter,
zoning
but no one ever noticed it before, and
Well, Tad has actually issued an opinion.
oh,
We've done this previously. She issued an opinion that it was a mistake and that the planning board would be the ones to issue the special permits. But, you know, it's much better to have it fixed
Absolutely.
statutorily
Yes.
than to
Absolutely.
to follow Ted.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make a motion that we authorize the chairman to send
Thank
the
you.
comment letter to the town board regarding the telecommunications
So
law?
moved.
Second.
Thank you, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and make it a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that lattice structure may have a lot to do with wind resistance.
That's what I think. That's exactly what I think.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure.
It's tall, it's up on a hill.
It's for stability and it's
tall
on
up
a
on a
hill.
hill, right?